Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, Commander is a great game because there is something for everyone, and conversely, there is something that's definitely not for everyone. Some Commanders out there just don't appeal to you for one reason or another, and sometimes, well, I just got to let you know which ones, yeah, you won't be seeing in my collection anytime soon, if ever. So with all that said, let's jump into the Commanders that I won't play so far from 2024. So first up, let's start with the Murders at Karlov Manor, if I could speak properly, Commanders. Let's just start from the beginning of the year. We have those in Voja, I can't remember how to say it. Well, my apologies, but you are not going to be one of my Commanders in my collection. My apologies, but you're not going to be one I'm going to be playing, although you are a very, very, very popular Commander right now. A 5/5 Wolf for 5 mana in Naya. Vigilance, Trample, Ward 3. Whenever it attacks, put X counters on each creature controller, X the number of elves you control. Draw a card for each wolf you control. So, this is a Commander that appeals to many players out there, which is completely fair and fine. Wolf Tribal really has certain kind of Commanders that support it. Mostly there are like Werewolf Tribal Commanders that sometimes have wolves in them too. But we're finally getting, more Wolf Tribal Commanders. But also, Elf Tribal is one that does have a ton of support. And this is another that can be built, well, fully Elf, fully Wolf, or a combination of both. Obviously, when it comes to the most support, you're getting that from the Elf side, and there's a lot of really powerful Elves out there. So this is a pretty powerful Commander. And one thing that can kind of turn people off about this Commander, that can kind of like irk people a little bit with this Commander, is that Ward 3. When it comes to Hexproof, that's been pretty much done away with for the most part, but Ward, once it's up to like 3, that's a significant amount of mana. I mean, there's some wards out there like Ward 8, and it's like that's just hexproof essentially. But Ward 3 is like it's within range of doing it, but it's so much to do it. Again, you have like, okay, I Swords of Plowshare as your commander. I gotta pay 4 mana in total to do that. So Ward can kind of just irk people a little bit. I don't like that Wizards personally is throwing Ward on a lot of things. I think they should save it for very specific scenarios, and not for a commander that is considered by some to be pushed in general. But yeah, I mean, it's one that I don't like when they put Ward on things. So that usually irks me a little bit. That being said, one of the reasons that I'm really not playing this commander is that I personally am just not a fan of tribal decks for the most part. Like, I just typically don't play those, except for like a, Lord's tribal, like a tribal deck, something like that. I'm not really a fan of tribal decks for the most part because they tend to be mostly like on rails. And what I mean by that is you literally could just, Scryfall search, elves essentially on Scryfall, and then just sort by EDH rec rank, and then probably just toss in the top however many into the deck around this, and it will probably work decently well because, and throwing in, other tribal synergies that are just standard for each tribal deck out there. It is a little bit more on rails, and I typically like to have a commander that's a bit more flexible. I'm not saying that there isn't innovation that can happen with a commander like this. There definitely is. I just personally see less innovation with a commander like this than with some others out there because, again, I tend to see tribal commanders on rails. So that's my opinion on Voja. I can't remember how to say it. I'm sorry, but you're not going to be any of my commanders anytime soon, if ever. Moving on, Judith, Carnage, Connoisseur. Now, I personally thought it was a very cool design of a commander. I will start with that. It's a cool design for a commander. That being said, this is ridiculous. It's a 3/4 human shaman for 5 mana in Rakdos. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one. That creature gains Death Touch and lifelink. Sorry, that spell, not creature. That spell gains Death Touch and lifelink. Create a 2/2 red imp creature token with, when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Yeah, I kind of just defaulted to saying creature because typically spells are not granted Death Touch or lifelink, but this one does. And what is somewhat problematic with this commander essentially is that this turns a lot of essentially useless spells like 1 damage to each your opponent's creatures into one-sided, incredibly easy board wipes that are like 1 mana and they gain you like 20 life a pop. It just kind of pushes things a bit too far in my opinion. And it also allows players to break one of their own typical rules of deck building, I would say. Typically, it's a taboo in Commander to have, like, board wipe tribal, right? Typically, I learned that the hard way back when I first started playing Commander. I played Selenia Dark Angel, which I loved that commander. It's a cool commander. And it was a cool deck. I like life swap type synergies. You can do a lot of cool things with it. That being said, when I first built the deck, because I was new to Commander, I built it the most efficient way that I could. And it had like, I don't know, 18, 20 Wraths in it. So just wiping the board again and again and again and again, because that was the efficient play, right? I want to control the board until I can get my pieces out so I can lose all the life I want to lose and then swap life with someone else to make sure that I'm not at a position where even if I'm at 1 life, that I feel threatened because there's threats on the battlefield or whatnot. So 18, 20 Wraths, whatever it is pretty much frowned upon by many players, and I learned that pretty quickly after playing a couple times and other players weren't having a good time because I would stall out games for a long, long time. This is the type of commander, again, where players kind of can justify breaking that mold. They can say, well, I mean, they're just like, 1 damage spells. Like, if my commander's not in play, they're useless. Let's be honest, your commander's got to be in play. You're going to have a lot of ways to protect it. You're going to have ways to, like Feign Death type effects. If it's dealt with, it comes right back. Then, and also that works well with, board wipes like a Pyroclasm, which will deal damage to each creature, including your own. So, players can justify, doing all this board wiping again and again and again because it's synergistic with the commander. And again, those cards that are used with this commander are just like draft chaff cards for the most part. Like, they're terrible for the most part in Commander, but with this kind of commander specifically, they're very, very good. So because of that, and not that there's not other ways to build this. You could build this just like lifelink with spells and that kind of stuff, but I don't see this commander as one that I personally would build because the way that you really should build it, if you're building it, to be effective and efficient with this commander, is just literally every single one of my opponent's creatures take this much damage. It costs me 1 or 2 mana to cast this spell. I wipe the board again. I wipe the board again. I wipe the board again. And it can just get really redundant, and players typically don't like playing against that. So even though I think it's a cool concept, I think it was pushed just a little too far with that. Moving on. Ansrag, the Quake Mole. This is one that the second I saw it, I kind of knew that I probably didn't want to play with it. Even though one of my favorite decks from when I was younger was, well, Turbo Fog. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a terrible player like that, where I just talked about how in Commander, stalling out the game is a no-no. However, that's completely fair game in Standard. You can play whatever you want in Standard, right? So essentially when I was playing against, a $1,000 Jund deck, I was playing with my $20 Turbo Fog deck and just like, okay, go ahead, attack me. Fog. Yay! All right, I'll draw 10 cards. Next turn, all right. Fog. Yay! It doesn't... Fogs typically don't work very well in Commander. That being said, with this commander, they are broken. It's an 8/4 Mole God, because that's a thing, for 4 mana and Rakdos. When it becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase, and by paying 7 mana in Gruul, it must be blocked each combat this turn if able. The combo is kind of printed on the card. It's a bit too pushed and a bit too easy, and that's something when it comes to a commander that I typically don't like to play these days. I'm not saying that in the past I didn't build commanders that were too easy, in my opinion, and I'm not saying the players can't build those commanders. I find this just a bit too easy. It just kind of gives you the answer. This takes very little innovation to make this commander incredibly powerful and very broken. I mean, at a base level, if you just give this indestructible, you have a repeatable board wipe, essentially, right? You just, okay, cool, it's indestructible. All right, I activate that ability. And people say, oh, that takes 8 mana to do all that, right? Because you gave it indestructible with withstand death or whatever it is, and then 7 extra mana. I mean, you're in green. You got ways to ramp and get there, okay? Or you can just use a lure type effect, essentially, to do that as well. But then you're basically okay, I attack you, I attack you, I attack you, I attack you, all your creatures are gone. I attack you, I attack you, I attack you, all creatures are gone. I do the same thing to you. Rinse and repeat when it comes to actually just controlling the board. But even worse is that it's very, very easy to go infinite with this, with a couple of fogs out there, or if an opponent has an indestructible creature, you're also going infinite there, or if you make an opponent's creature indestructible, yeah, there are ways to very easily get infinite combats, essentially, and rules lawyers out there, sure, 1 trillion, whatever it is. It's not even 1 trillion, because obviously, I mean, it depends on your opponent's life totals and what other creature you're getting through, or if you give this trample or whatnot. It's very, very easy. Again, just it's written on the card how this thing is broken. You can break it very easily, and I just don't typically like commanders that I typically don't build around commanders, I should say, that I consider to be too easy and too pushed. I typically don't these days, again, back in the day, not too many years ago, I mean, I definitely, built around certain commanders out there. Maybe one that's even banned these days. I still think I built it in a fun way, though, for myself. But anyways, regardless, it is one that I'm not going to be building around because of that. Next up, another trend that Wizards has lately, other than just making a lot of push commanders, is kind of like a default option that they know is probably going to be decently popular for commanders, and it's really displayed on Delny Streetwise Lookout. A 2/2 human scout for 3 mana and white. Creatures you control power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. On top of that, if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers initial time. These doubling up of triggers and that kind of thing, it's getting a little old. And back in the day, I had a taste of deck, right? When they had the very first, I think that was the very first commander essentially that doubled up things, right? When it came to that kind of thing. Like, it was like reverse Panharmonicon. It was Death Harmonicon, right? Very first thing. It was very, very new at that point when it came to, oh, okay, cool. Double up this type of trigger. Build the entire deck around this type of trigger. And then we got more, and then we got more, and then we got more, and now it's like every single set we are getting at least one, and we might see one here later in this episode where I talk about one too. It seems like in every single set we're getting at least one that's like, this thing triggers twice. I mean, one of the most popular commanders out there is Ishin, and that's what it does. It's basically just a better Wolfgar, essentially, right, when it comes to attack triggers. You've got Yarok for, ETB triggers. You've got all these kind of doubling up of triggers out there, and the deck kind of builds itself again in that way where it's like, okay, just get the best things that do that and chuck them into the deck, essentially, right? This one is, again, very straightforward. You're like, okay, search for creatures with power 2 or less. Does it have a trigger? Cool. Is it a good trigger? Awesome, good. All right, we get that twice now. And if they're ETBs, yeah, I'll use blink effects. There is some innovation that can be had, obviously, and it is a commander that is mono white, which is, again, typically considered to be the weakest color out there. That doesn't mean that you need to kind of give it all this, I guess, when it comes to, again, just utilizing that, again, just kind of copy-paste commander that I, again, am pretty tired of seeing these days. I think others are as well, when it's like, okay, yeah, here comes another, doubler of a trigger. Get ready for these types of decks out there. So, Delny, you are also a commander that I'm not going to be building around pretty much ever. Next up, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Let's talk about the commanders in that one that I will not be building around. I'm very sorry, Bonnie Paul Clearcutter. Ironically, I do live in Minnesota right now. And, yeah, this is obviously a reference to Paul Bunyan and Baby Blue Ox. And it's one that would be, like, very thematic for me to play with. But, no, I'm not going to be playing with this one. A 6/5 Giant Scout with Reach for 6 mana in Simic. When it enters the battlefield, create Bow, a legendary blue ox creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Whenever you attack, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. Okay, so there's like a slight change to like the way that they typically do with this, right? Typically, it's just like, okay, land from your hand on the battlefield. But wait, we changed it. Land from your hand or graveyard. Wow. It's basically just kind of your... Again, rinse and repeat Simic commander. We are starting to see Wizards break out of this box more and more, and then it's just kind of disappointing when they get back to that. Like, the first part I was sold with, right? I mean, 6/5 Reach comes into play, makes Babe the blue ox, essentially, with power touch equal and land control. That's really cool, right? That's a lot of power that can be had with both. Okay, how does this play into that? Oh, okay, yeah, just normal Simic things. Draw, land, basically, I mean, in different ways. Tatiova, EC, whatever that one... God is for 3 mana. Basically what Simic does, essentially, right? Simic does draw and land ramp. That's what Simic does. Wizards break out of that box. Stop going back to the box, okay? So, yeah, this is one that I am not going to be building around because it's just kind of samey, and I already did Tatiova a long, long time ago, and it was a fun deck, but that can also get a bit obnoxious, just playing all the lands and drawing all the cards, so... It is something that just has been very Simic, and I appreciate when they break out of that box more and more often, more lately, except for this one. Moving on, the Gitrog Ravenous Ride, a 6/5 with Trample and Haste that costs 5 mana in Golgari. Whenever it deals combat to your player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled it this turn. If you do, draw X cards and put up to X land cards to your hand on the battlefield, tap or X the sacrifice creature's power, and it has saddle 1. So this is a commander that is interesting, right? I do find it to be interesting. The concept is interesting. Again, when they brought about saddle, it's like, okay, you go about things in this way. Some things are like, okay, when you attack with the saddled creature, this one is, hey, you have to hit a player. So you at least have to hit a player. That being said, this is one that can just snowball a bit too quickly, where the game is just basically over if this gets through once with the right opportunity. So, again, there are certain creatures out there like Wall of Blood where you can just pay life and you get a lot of power, all right? Or Dagmoth Titan, whatever that one is as well. Like 11 power for 4 mana. That has a giant downside, but you don't have to worry about that downside when you're saddling with this. So there are certain things out there that you can get out very quickly. Again, like Dagmoth Titan, I think is 4 mana. So the turn before this, you could get that out. Next turn, get this out. Swing right away. You're going to be able to get through on someone most of the time. Again, Trample and Haste. And then you just drew 11 cards and probably played 5 extra lands, and you're way too far ahead of everyone. And again, you could like turn 3 Wall Blood. I mean, even if you're ramping earlier, right? You could probably like turn 3 Wall Blood, turn 4, get Rog even, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah, cool, I drew 20 cards and I put 10 lands into play, and the game is basically over at that point because, again, if you've got so many resources ahead of your opponents, they're not going to be able to keep up. So it is one that it's an interesting design, but again, it's just like, it's a bit too far on that push. It's a bit too far on that push. Like, even if it was just maybe like half the creature's power, I'm not sure exactly how you would limit this. In that, I mean, yeah, I don't know how exactly we would limit this in a way that I would find a little more acceptable when it comes to one that just doesn't snowball way too quickly, and then, yeah, the game is essentially over. It's, again, the game's not over. Like, I mean, players don't have to just say, no, quit right there, essentially, and I don't recommend that you do, but everyone kind of knows once someone's up like turn 4, turn 5, and they're up like 10 lands on you, the game is essentially over. So there you go. Next up, Ariat the Beguiler. So this is one that, again, I like the concept, but just the finished product is just not for me. A 4/4 human warlock for 4 mana and S worth lifelink. Whenever an aura you control becomes attached to a non-land permanent, opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to that aura's mana value, gain control of that permanent for as long as that aura is attached to it. Yes, I understand that there's a limitation to, okay, how many auras are out there that can actually enchant things that cost a certain amount. I understand that. I definitely do. That being said, even with that in mind, there are auras out there that are at like 5, okay? There are some out at 6 as well. And also the lower ones are going to be easier to attach. So you have plenty of opportunities to steal like middle of the road to pretty good card. I mean, and that's what I kind of think about Commander too, is that like when you look at like the curve of Commander decks, typically many are 4, 3, 4. So you can steal most things with this Commander pretty easily and pretty effectively and pretty efficiently just by chucking essentially any aura onto them that can enchant them. And then you steal that. And yes, your opponents can get them back. However, they're not getting them back by taking out the Commander. They have to get them out by actually taking out the aura attached to them, because essentially all your auras become control magic, essentially. I mean, for any kind of permanent, except for, thank goodness, non-land, because yeah, if not, you'd just be like, okay, I mean, I guess many playgroups wouldn't like, and many players probably wouldn't play ones that are like, okay, I turned your land into an island with this. Okay, cool, I steal it. It's mine now. I ramped. Yay! Land theft isn't exactly not allowed, but recommended by many playgroups. So this is one where, again, I think it's an interesting concept, and I do like that they're taking auras in different directions other than just Voltron or just like Enchantress Draw. But where the first Ariat, or I don't know how to say that name, I'm sorry, was very, I think, effective with just giving you a new avenue for victory with auras. This one's kind of more it's very much and I'm not always against like feel bad commanders, but it's very much a feel bad commander where you're just like, oh, I steal that. Oh, I steal that. Oh, I steal that. Oh, I steal that. And unless you've got a lot of removal to get your things back, or you happen to like hit like your mass enchantment removal, you're going to be in trouble for quite a while. And just, it's probably, in my opinion, just not a good table playing experience, at least one that I don't want to participate in when I'm playing the commander. So I don't want to be the one inflicting that. I'm fine playing against this commander. I will not be the one actually utilizing it though. So Ariat the Beguiler, I think it's an interesting concept, but it's one that I'm not going to be playing for all those reasons. And finally, in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction main set, Geared Mirror of the Wilds. Yeah, the second I saw this one, I kind of knew it was not for me. 3/3 Hasty Human Shaman for 3 mana in Naya. Non-token creatures you control have tap, create tokens, copy of target token you control that enter the battlefield this turn. Ooh, okay, this is just really pushed. Again, when I say pushed, when I say too easy, this is kind of like the definition of all of it. This is, I mean, Wizards just kind of giving you all the answers to the test right away, and it's the type of commander that, yeah, if you're building it effectively and efficiently, you're going to be going infinite with this pretty quickly, actually. All you need is just like one creature that untaps when it ETBs, and then any way to make a token copy of it, like Twin Flame. And then you're there. You're off to the races. You essentially just win. So, yeah, and the commander itself can actually participate in the combo as well. It's really, really easy to go infinite with this. Even if you're not going infinite with it too, it's just like, okay, I've got 7 creatures in play. I cast one spell that made a treasure. Oh, okay, cool. Tap all my creatures, make 7 treasures. Probably have a spell that can untap my creatures, like Vitalize, untap my creatures, do it again and again. There's a lot of broken things that you can do with this one. It's just really pushed, and it's really, really, in my opinion, again, too easy. It's one of those commanders where when you start building it, you're like, I'm doing all these clever things, and it's like, but it's like, there's way too many easy things to do with it where it just like doesn't come off clever, in my opinion, at the end of the day. So, personally, this is one that I'm not going to be playing with pretty much ever. Moving on to the Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander. Precon Commanders. That was a long sentence, but I think that made sense. Felix 5 Boots, I'm sorry, but you're a commander that I'm not going to be playing with ever. A 5/4 Ooze Rogue with Menace, and there's the Ward 2 again. Wizards, right? Ward 2, just chucking it on everything. For 5 mana in Sultai. If a creature you control dealing combat damage to a player causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers initial time. So, basically exact same reasoning for Delny earlier when I was talking about Wizards just copy-pasting, triggers initial time, here's a commander. Okay, what other triggers have we not doubled up on yet? Okay, find that one, cool. We double up on it now. Okay, get another one, find that one, cool. Double up on that now. But we put it as an Ooze and Cowboy Boots, so it's okay and fine. Oh, wait, we don't want players to be able to remove that too quickly. Ward 2. Yeah, again, it's one that doesn't need Ward and doesn't need to exist, in my opinion. Again, it just, these are the kinds of commanders, again, where it's just lazy designing, in my opinion. It's just, there are so many other unique kinds of commanders that you could design. I mean, go on, like, custom Magic. Go on, amazing communities out there that make custom cards, like Custom Dragon Highlander, okay? And see amazing types of commanders that they are making that are unique. I mean, there's plenty of other episodes that I've already done that show off Custom Dragon Highlander cards. I mean, make sure you check those out, like the Nintendo episode. Check those out and see, like, what kinds of amazing designs that they are making. And then you see, I'm not going to say, like, lazy work, but it's like, and I can't necessarily even fault them for doing it because these types of commanders end up being popular and they drive a bunch of, decks to be built around them. But it's just, like, low to the ground just effort, it seems like, when it comes to actually thinking through and designing a commander that players want to build around versus one that takes any thought. Again, just literally find creatures that do combat damage triggers, search on Scryfall, sort by EDH rec rank, in Sultai, chuck them into your deck, and it's probably going to work pretty well. So yeah, it's just one that, for a lot of reasons, again, I just don't think it needs to necessarily exist. Moving on. One that really doesn't need to exist, which I know there are players out there that are completely fine with treasures and love treasures, and it's like, I think, the 3rd most popular theme these days. Personally, I'm a player out there who thinks that treasures have overstayed their welcome a bit much, and maybe were a good solution at first to try to work out a balance between, like, okay, green is ramping a ton with lands, and if you don't have green, then you're in trouble. And to be like, let's turn it the other way, and now we give all the other colors treasures to catch up, which are basically like little, I mean, what's the card? Like, was it Mox? No, it's Lotus Petal. Is that the one, essentially? They're all kind of like that. Is it Lotus Petal? Whichever one can tap sacrifice. I think it's Lotus Petal. They're basically just Lotus Petals. So you kind of went a bit too far in that direction, though. And now you're just like, okay, commanders that literally just deal with treasures. 3/3 Vihan Goldwaker, a Dwarf Warlock for 3 mana in Mardu. Other outlaws you control have Vigilance and Haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have treasures you control become 3/3 Construct, Assassin, Artifact creatures, and other types until end of turn. I mean, let's be honest here. The reason that this one is seeing so much play already is not because of Outlaw Tribal. And maybe that's part of it, but, like, it's not because of Outlaw Tribal. It's because all you need to do with this commander is just find a bunch of ways to make a ton of treasures, which there are a ton of ways already out there. You get a bunch of benefits from that. You probably throw another procession out there. You're getting twice as many. Good for you. And then all of a sudden, you're just like, okay, not only can I win with my treasures by casting big spells, but I could just swing with them and take you out. Cool. Yeah, I just, when it comes to, like, a treasure tribal type deck, I'm immediately kind of put off by building around that and playing that because I just personally think that treasures are have overstayed their welcome. They're just, Wizards went a bit too far by trying to include those in the game. Like at first it was a decent amount that was fine, just a certain number of cards actually made those, and now it's just a bit too much in my opinion, where things can get just a bit out of hand and out of control, and like Smothering Tithe is a card that probably shouldn't have been printed either. Just stick with that right now. Okay, moving on. Stella Elite wild card. I can't believe they printed this as a precon commander. I mean, I don't think they included combos in the precon, but let me know if I'm wrong on that. But you literally could just chuck in like $1 worth of cards and throw in like at least 10 combos. So this is a commander that is super pushed and probably doesn't need to exist. A 2/4 Heathen Rogue for 3 mana and is it. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile a top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So that is kind of like Jory N to start off with, but basically Jory N is like draw the card. This is like, okay, like impulse draw the card. So, I mean, at a base level, that's already like interesting. There's ways to play around that. And you could give it another ability that wasn't what this next ability is and be very interesting. The next ability, though, is tap, copy target, in sorcery spell you control. You may choose targets for the copy. Activate only if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. There's no limitations on this. And typically, I'm against cards having limitations. Like, I do not like the text activate only sorcery speed. Or, activate only as a sorcery. Or, activate only once each turn. I typically don't like those. Typically not. This needed some kind of a limitation. Because this is so easily, so apparently broken, it's not even funny. I mean, you can say that, sure, this is, it has a requirement, right? It only can be activated if you've cast 3 more spells this turn. Give me a break. That is so easy to do in any kind of a spell slinger strategy, which this very easily can meld into. You just cast, okay, I cast Opt. Cool. I cast Consider. All right. Cast my next spell, which I'm going to copy infinitely. All you need to do is cast something like Cerulean Wisps. Draw a card and untap target creature for 1 blue mana, for a blue mana. Then you copy it infinitely. I mean, not infinitely, because you draw your entire deck and draw yourself out. I guess you have Lab Maniac in play, then yeah, you copy it infinitely and you win. But if not, you're just like, okay, I draw every card in my deck, but the bottom 3 or whatever you want to do. Or you have like Dramatic Reversal, and you're like, okay, I might not be drawing my entire library, but I untap all my creatures and all my mana rocks, and now I have infinite mana and probably infinite card draw, infinite damage, whatever it is. If you have a Tim in play, you have a card draw engine in play, whatever it is, you just go infinite with this quite easily. And obviously, if you have infinite mana, you can just win the game right then and there with many ways. This commander is, again, just too pushed, too easy, and it just doesn't, I don't know. Like, again, when they're putting, like, all these limitations on other commanders, they don't limit certain ones. Again, like Girid, like this one, and they can say they have a limitation on this, right? Like, ooh, well, with Girid, we said non-token, which makes sense, because otherwise it'd be, like, broken. I mean, more broken than it already is, because it could just combo with itself. But this one is just like, okay, we put a limitation on it. 3 or more spells. Like, give me a break. That's like super, that's not even a limitation. You're just like, okay, like, cast a ritual effect, I cast a draw spell, and now I cast my spell I want to copy infinitely. Cool. The setup is not difficult at all, and it just is pushed. It's super pushed. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Stella Lee. Wild card. You'll be staying in the wild, I guess, because you're not going to be seeing play in my collection. Okay, that was bad, but you know what I mean. Next up, moving on, I'm going to be giving you an early preview to one that has not come out yet. But unlike many of the cards that we've seen from Modern Horizons 3 so far that are leaks, this is not a leak. This, I believe, is an official spoiler from Wizards. It's apparently already $77, and it's not the price tag that has me saying that I will not be playing Emrakul: The World Anew. It's a 12/12 Eldrazi for 12 mana. When you cast this spell, gain control of all creatures target player controls. If you stop right there, that's why. Flying protection from spells and from permanents that were cast this turn. When it leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all creatures you control. Madness pays 6 colors. Okay, so this is one that is just, again, a type of gameplay that I personally don't want to play as my deck. I don't want to just steal someone's entire board. I just don't really want to do that. I mean, I guess here's the thing. I would be okay with that in a strategy that actually takes effort to do. You actually have to, like, set yourself up to do so with other, I mean, I guess as a Villainous Wealth type player, right? Okay, I like playing Villainous Wealth. That's stealing off the top of someone's library. I'm not stealing what's already on their board, and I have to do a lot of work to actually, mass ramp, to then copy it a lot of times, to, steal a bunch of stuff off the top library. And that's just a personal distinction, and you might think that that's hypocritical from, like, stealing things from one area, but a different, to some people, is not different. That being said, just stealing player's entire board, all their creatures, just from the command zone, to me is, again, a bit too easy and a bit rude, and also just the downside to this isn't really a downside. Again, when this leaves the battlefield, again, no matter how it leaves the battlefield, is, you know, dealt with by exile, dealt with by sacrificing it, dealt with by bouncing it, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Those creatures are sacrificed then. So the creatures you stole are sacrificed. That player is not getting them back. I mean, get them back in the graveyard, but they don't get them back at all. And with this commander, the way that I would build it if I was being efficient with it, which, you know, you would, is to bounce this back to your hand, have different ways to bounce back to your hand, like blood clock, those kinds of things. When you need to bounce it back to your hand, because you're like, oh, okay, cool, I stole that player's creatures, they were the best at the time. Okay, cool, I bounce it back to my hand now because that player over there has got the best creatures. I just eliminated that player's board. It was like, you know, one-sided board wipe against an opponent. That player's board's gone. My commander's back in my hand. I've got free ways to discard this, like a key to the city or whatnot, essentially. Discard this commander, play it for just 6 mana, essentially, and then steal that player's board because their creatures are better. It's going to be very, very difficult for your opponents to even build up an army, because when they do so, they are locked in your crosshairs, essentially, and you're just going to take their army from them. And then beat them with their army, beat them, and then even if someone else builds a bigger army, then you just get rid of it, and then you take another one. So this kind of commander, again, it's not, and it's also very hard to deal with, and it's a 2-shot KO. Yeah, it's one that just, like, yes, it costs 12 mana, but again, if you just, literally, you could just chuck in a ton of ramp into this stack. You 20-plus ramp spells, okay? 20-plus mana rocks, whatever it is, and just focus on that. And even if you did nothing else, you'd still do great, because all you need to do is just ramp, get this out, steal someone's creatures. They put in all the effort. You just take their creatures, and then you swing at them with their creatures. You swing at someone else with, you know, Emre who's got flying and is a 12/12, so you can just 2-shot that other player, whatever it is. This is one that's just a bit, it's a type of gameplay that I personally don't like to play with, personally, and that's coming from a Villainous Wealth player, which, again, some might see as a hypocritical, but I see it as different, stealing off the top of someone's library versus just stealing their board. And also, again, it's a bit too easy to use and abuse. So, Emrakul, the world anew, you are a new commander that I will not be playing with. But now this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts are on these commanders, on my picks for commanders that I will not be playing with. And I know that there's players out there that maybe already have decks around these commanders, maybe ones that are your favorite commanders out there, and that's completely fine, or ones that you're planning on building, and that is completely fine. Everyone's got, you know, different play styles, everyone's got different preferences on what decks they like to build. I'd like to hear from you. What commanders out there are ones that you aren't going to be playing with anytime soon? And if you are interested in these commanders, though, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below, because, again, teach their own. If you want to build around these commanders, go for it. And actually, I do have some deck techs around some of these commanders, so if you want some good budget-friendly deck techs around them, make sure you check those out. Of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.